First, it's important to understand that most of the fans who are attending the World Cup in Qatar have never met a Jewish person or an Israeli before. So it's a first encounter. And after more than 100 years of mistrust between the two sides, there will be suspicion and shock. And a lot of people don't want to put themselves in this situation because they don't understand the consequence of it. That doesn't justify the overreaction and the hostility and the shouting and the screaming from some of them. As your reporter kindly mentioned, most people refuse but walk away smoothly without a problem. But some have decided to choose the overreaction and aggression. And unfortunately, although the Qatari official welcomed Israel, they had 10 years to say to their crowd that this is a football occasion. We will have to welcome people from different backgrounds, different countries, which you may have disagreement with, but let's focus on the football and put the politics aside. Unfortunately, I didn't see this message coming from Doha, and that's sad in my humble opinion.
And sad indeed. And Nervana, a lot of people are posting these clips online, really with glee to make a political point. They say that it proves the Abraham Accords were just empty agreements between governments and they don't really reflect the will of the people. Do you agree with that?
Actually, no, and I found it very baffling to drag the Abraham Accord into this. The Abraham Accord is neither Qatar nor Saudi Arabia are part of the Abraham Accord. Neither the people or the citizen of those countries are mentally prepared for all these encounters with Israel. Unlike the others, to ignore the fact that countries like the United Arab Emirates are starting to teach the Holocaust in their school, to ignore the fact that there is a huge number of Israeli tourists travel to Bahrain and United Arab Emirates without being harassed, without being bashed or have a hostile reaction is really wrong and frankly a spin to what happened in Doha. Again, we have to separate what's happening in the Abraham Accord from what's happening in the World Cup in Qatar. Remembering that the Qatari media for years and years and years were against normalization and against the Abraham Accord.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, other people online say that this wouldn't be happening if Israel would just end the occupation of the West Bank. They say that then Israel and Israelis would be accepted everywhere across the region. Would you agree with that?
I have to admit that I am a very strong supporter of the two-state solution. But to apply the two-state solution, we have to understand that there have to be a lot of things happening to make the two-state solution successful. One of them is to build bridges between the two sides, is to accept the Jewish people and stop anti-Semitism, because that will never make peace practical on the ground, to have open discussion and debate about what the Palestinians want and what the Israeli want and how to make the two-state solution successful. Without that, the two-state solution will only create the situation we have in South Lebanon, with situation happening in Gaza, and militant groups who want more, and other side in Israel who reject all the peace and unfortunately voting for right-wing extremists who are not helping the two-state solution. We have to acknowledge that there is so many groundwork have to happen to end this 100 years conflict and to build a peaceful bond between the two sides and embrace that two-state solution is a state for Palestine, but state for Israel. Let's not forget that.
Right. And just finally, Nervana, I mean, there was some optimism here in Israel when we learned that Israelis would be allowed to go to Qatar, that people would be walking around together and mixing, and maybe the love of the game would bring people together. And it doesn't seem to have worked out that way when it comes to Israel.
Well, I am fortunately going back to the point I made. Qatar had 10 years to build stadiums, to have 5G, but didn't prepare even its local Qatari citizen of opening up and accepting this huge number of crowd from everywhere. And that is, in my humble opinion, is not right. You cannot, when I read that they allow Israel, it was a last minute decision. It was based on that the authority will not harass the Israelis, but the authority are not everything. Suddenly Qatar start to see that when you have two-way dualism of one line between the official and one line between the people is not working, you will have problem. I doubt anyone in Qatar know that the Qatari officials have contacted the Israelis to have approval of digging or for gas in Lebanon after the maritime agreement between Lebanon and Israel. So this kind of stuff, you hear it in Israeli media, but you will not hear it in Qatar-based Arab media. And that's the problem. You have to stop the double language. You have to tell your people that we are dealing with Israelis and we have to accept them, even if we don't like them. But that doesn't happen.
Okay, Nervana, great to have your take. Thank you very much indeed, Nervana Mahmoud there.